The night was quiet, but it didn't feel safe. City lights flickered along the empty streets, painting long shadows that seemed to follow her every step. She pulled her coat tighter around herself, though the chill wasn't the only thing making her shiver. She wasn't expecting anyone. She wasn't expecting danger. And yet, deep in her gut, a small warning whispered that the world wasn't quite as ordinary as it seemed. She hugged herself, walking faster, heels clicking against the wet pavement. The rain from Pars earlier had left the streets slick, reflecting neon signs like liquid fire. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a meaningless notification, but it gave her a small comfort, something real in the silence. She barely noticed the figure until he appeared in her path. He was tall, impossibly composed, moving like he belonged to the shadows themselves. Black coat, sharp suit underneath, the kind of presence that made people step back without realizing it. His eyes, dark and unreadable, fixed on her with a precision that was almost frightening. And yet, there was something in the way he looked at her that made her heart skip a beat. Something dangerous, yes, but something magnetic too. She froze, unsure whether to step aside or keep walking. The world seemed to pause. Cars passed, their lights illuminating his face for brief, blinding moments. He didn't move. He simply watched. Then, as if sensing her hesitation, he tilted his head slightly, a question without words. Her heart raced. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his world. And yet, she felt an inexplicable pull, like fate itself had led her here. Something about him whispered that her life, the life she thought she knew, was about to change forever. A sudden noise, a cat darting from the alley, a loose trash can toppling, made her jump, and, in that moment, he moved. Faster than she could react, he was beside her. His hand, firm and warm, brushed against her arm. "Are you okay?" His voice was low, controlled, with just enough softness to make her knees weaken. She swallowed hard. I'm fine." But the tremble in her voice betrayed her words. He studied her, eyes narrowing as though calculating every possibility, every risk. Then, slowly, deliberately, he extended a hand, not threatening, but protective. "You shouldn't be out here alone." Her instincts told her to refuse, to walk away, to escape. But something in his presence made her hesitate. She felt a flicker of trust, an impossible trust, that made her voice almost whisper, "Could I get a hug, just for a second?" He froze. A flicker of something, surprise, curiosity, maybe amusement, crossed his face. Then, against the logic of the world, against the rules that he followed every day, he stepped closer and wrapped his arms around her. The warmth, the undeniable strength of him, sent a shock through her entire body. She closed her eyes, letting herself feel, letting herself fall, just for a moment, into the danger and comfort of him. When he pulled back, just slightly, the night felt different, louder, more dangerous, more alive. He studied her, his gaze dark and unreadable, and yet something in that look promised that their paths had crossed for a reason. And deep inside, she knew, even if she didn't yet, understand how her life was about to be stolen, piece by piece, by a man she didn't know and yet couldn't resist. The street seemed emptier now, the shadows longer, and as she walked on, heart racing, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was still there, watching, waiting, and already a part of her story, a part she hadn't agreed to but couldn't escape. She couldn't stop thinking about him. Even as she walked through her apartment door, shaking off the cold, the memory of his presence lingered like a shadow she couldn't escape. There was something about the way he moved, the way he looked at her, that made the ordinary world feel suddenly small, fragile, and unreal. She tried to brush it off. He was just a stranger, a man from the night. And yet, every sound, Outside her window, every shifting shadow made her pulse quicken. It was as if the world itself remembered him, as if he had left a mark not just on her skin, but on her very soul. Then he appeared again. Not by chance, she realized, but because he had chosen to be there. Outside her favorite cafe, leaning against the brick wall, arms crossed, eyes dark and calculating. Her breath caught. He was calm, confident, the kind of man who seemed untouchable, untamed, and utterly dangerous. "You came back," she said, her voice barely audible over the city hum. He didn't smile. Not yet, but there was a tension in the curve of his lips, a shadow of amusement. "I wasn't sure you'd ask for another encounter," he said softly, his voice low, velvety and hypnotic. "Or that you'd survive it." Her heart jumped at his words. Survive it? Was he serious? And yet, there was no malice in his gaze, only something magnetic, dangerous, impossible to resist. She shivered, both from fear and from something deeper, something she didn't dare name. I just... She hesitated, then took a small step closer. "Could I get a hug? Just one more?" Her voice was uncertain, vulnerable. He studied her, silent, unmoving, as if weighing the consequences. There was a pause so long, it made her question her courage, and then, slowly, he nodded. One hand extended, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. The contact, light and electrifying, made her gasp. When he wrapped his arms around her, it was nothing like she expected. It was not gentle. It was not casual. It was a claim. Strong, protective, impossible to ignore. His chest was warm against hers, and the faint scent of him, smoke, leather, danger, made her knees threaten to give way. She pressed herself against him, hesitant, craving, unsure of what she was doing. And he held her without question, without restraint, without letting her go. It was a dangerous intimacy, one that carried both promise and peril. In that moment, the world outside ceased to exist. He pulled back slightly, just enough to look into her eyes. Dark, intense, every unspoken word pressed between them like a living thing. "You shouldn't ask for things you're not ready for," he said, his tone calm, but edged with warning. "Some things, once given, can't be taken back." Her heart raced. She didn't know what he meant, and part of her feared finding out. But another part, the part she didn't admit, even to herself, wanted more. Wanted him. Even if it wasn't dangerous, even if it would destroy her. "Maybe I'm ready," she whispered, barely audible. And the heat in her voice betrayed the truth she barely understood herself. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, silent, like a predator calculating, deciding, testing. And then, almost imperceptibly, he brushed a hand along her jawline, a touch electric and intimate. She felt exposed, alive, and entirely his. When he finally stepped back, the space between them was charged, thick with attention neither could ignore. She knew with terrifying clarity that this stranger, this man of shadows, power and secrets, had already taken something from her. Not her body, not yet, but her trust, her fear, her heart. And deep down, she realized she didn't want it back. As he turned to leave, the faintest hint of a smirk crossed his lips, one that promised danger, desire, and a story that had only just begun. She watched him go, knowing, without knowing, how that her life, her heart, and her very soul were now entangled with a man who existed in darkness, power, and irresistible temptation. Days passed, but he didn't leave her mind. Every routine, every mundane detail of her life seemed suddenly sharper, as if the world itself had changed. She walked the same streets, entered the same cafes, smiled at the same barista, and yet everywhere she went, She felt it, the sense of being watched. Not in a threatening way. At least not yet. More like a shadow lingering at the edge of her world. A presence she couldn't ignore. She tried to convince herself it was imagination, that the danger she had felt that night was over. But the truth whispered to her in every quiet moment. He wasn't finished. He couldn't be. It started with small glimpses. A man in a tailored black coat slipping through the crowd at the park, disappearing before she could get a good look. A dark car parked just a few steps behind her, engine off, no one inside. Or so it seemed. Every time she turned, he wasn't there, yet she felt his gaze pressing against her back like a physical weight. Her friends noticed it too. "You've been jumpy," one said. "Something's going on." She forced a laugh, shaking her head, pretending it was nothing. But she couldn't explain it. How could she? How could she tell anyone that a man she barely knew had already entered her world, and it terrified her in ways she didn't understand? Meanwhile, in the shadows of the city, he watched. Every movement, every routine, every quiet smile she gave to the world, it all mattered to him. He didn't follow for control. Not entirely. It was curiosity, fascination, something deeper, something that had nothing to do with his power and everything to do with her. He saw her in ways no one else did. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the way her lips quivered when she concentrated, the slight hesitation in her step when she thought no one was looking. Every detail built a picture he couldn't stop studying. Yet, he remained a stranger in her life. He didn't approach, didn't call, didn't intrude. That was the rule he always followed, the code he lived by. She didn't know it, but the life he led, one of power, fear, and shadows, was not hers to enter freely. And yet, the line between their worlds had already begun to blur. And then came the moments she couldn't ignore. The first brush of his presence in a crowd, a glance across a room, dark eyes locking with hers, disappearing before she could blink. A sense of recognition, a shiver of electricity running down her spine. She didn't know how he had found her, or why he was always so close yet unreachable. But the thrill, the fear, and the fascination was impossible to resist. She began noticing patterns. Certain streets seemed safer when he was near. She felt a strange, unspoken protection, though she didn't know from what. And each time their eyes met, even from afar, her heartbeat betrayed her. Faster, louder, a drumbeat she couldn't ignore. Her curiosity began to grow. Who was he? Why was he here? Why did he matter so much? Without a word, without a reason? She tried to dismiss it as chance, fate, coincidence. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. It never was. In the quiet of her apartment, she traced the shadows on the walls, thinking of him, wondering when their worlds would collide again. And somewhere in the darkness of the city, he thought of her too. Not just as a passing stranger, not just as someone to watch, but as something essential, something dangerous, something worth the risk. And as the night stretched long, filled with secrets neither fully understood, the invisible line between their worlds continued to thin. She was unaware that her life had already changed, that the man she had barely met, the stranger she had only hugged once, had begun to pull her into a world she couldn't escape, a world where desire, danger, and fate were about to collide. It was a quiet evening at her favorite cafe, the kind of place where the dim lights softened everything, and the smell of coffee made the world feel slower, safer. She had come to escape the lingering sense of being watched, to convince herself that the shadows chasing her thoughts were just imagination. She didn't expect him. But there he was, sitting at a corner table, back straight, eyes scanning the room with a predator's precision. She froze for a heartbeat, a chill racing down her spine. He didn't look menacing, not exactly, but there was a weight to him, a presence that made the air between them feel charged, dangerous, electric. He noticed her immediately, and when his dark eyes found hers across the room, it was like the rest of the cafe didn't exist. The chatter of patrons, the clinking of cups, the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. It all faded. It was just her and him, two lives momentarily suspended in a taut, unspoken tension. He gestured subtly, a tilt of his head, an invitation she couldn't ignore. She walked toward him, every step cautious, but drawn by something she couldn't name, something she didn't dare resist. "Sit," he said, voice low, smooth, and controlled, but with a hint of something curious. It wasn't a command, not exactly, but it carried the weight of someone used to having the world bend to, his will. And in a way, she found herself obeying without question. "I wasn't expecting you," she admitted, heart still racing. He shrugged lightly, but it was more calculated than casual. "I don't do expected," he said. His gaze held hers, dark and unreadable, like he was both measuring her and memorizing her. "And you don't blend into normal either." Her lips parted slightly, unsure whether to respond, unsure what he meant. There was a confidence about him, a danger that made her pulse quicken, but there was also an unmistakable curiosity, a softness buried beneath the power, hidden in the angles of his face, in the rare flicker of a smile he didn't allow anyone else to see. I just come here sometimes, to think, to feel like I have a little control," she said, attempting to mask her nerves. He leaned back, arms resting on the table, his movements deliberate, measured, like every gesture was a test. "Control is an illusion," he said softly, and she felt it like a brush of cold air against her skin. "Especially when someone like me decides to enter your life." Her stomach twisted. Someone like him? She wanted to ask, but the words got caught in her throat. Instead, she studied him. The dark hair falling over his forehead, the sharp line of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes that promised danger and secrecy. There was a magnetic pull to him, a gravity she couldn't fight, no matter how hard she tried. Why me?" she whispered finally, barely audible. He leaned forward slightly, the faintest tilt, as if deciding how much to reveal. "You're not afraid. Not completely. And you notice. You feel more than most. That's dangerous for someone like you. And yet, that's why I can't stay away." Her breath hitched. Dangerous, yes. Irresistible, yes. And somehow, he knew her in ways she didn't even know herself. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled with all the things neither dared say, aloud. And in that silence, she realized something terrifying and thrilling at the same time. She wanted him to stay. She wanted the danger, the intensity, the darkness that clung to him. Finally, he stood, smooth, controlled, and undeniably dominant. "Think carefully," he said softly, almost a warning. "Meeting me, it changes things, irreversibly." And with that, he left, slipping out into the night, as if he had never been there. But she knew he had. Every nerve in her body, every thought in her mind, told her that their lives were already intertwined, and that this first conversation, though brief, had shifted everything. The world she thought she knew was gone, and the stranger, this Mafia man, enigmatic and dangerous, was now at the center of it. She had thought the night was ordinary, thought the shadows were gone, thought that for a few fleeting hours the world was safe. But the danger didn't care about ordinary nights, and it didn't care about her. She was walking home from the cafe, the city streets quiet but alive with the distant hum of tires and faint voices. Her heels clicked against the pavement, each step echoing in the empty lanes, when she noticed the first warning. A man lingering too close, watching her every move. His eyes were hard, calculating, and she felt the familiar prickle of fear creep up her spine. Her pace quickened. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to disappear, but she wasn't fast enough. The man closed the distance. A hand reached toward her, rough, demanding, and suddenly she realized she was trapped in the kind of danger she had only read about in whispered warnings. And then he was there, a shadow among shadows, moving faster than the eye could follow. One moment, he was behind her, another. His presence filled the space between them. The man who had haunted her, thoughts, the stranger with the dark eyes, the impossible presence. He was real, and he was every bit as formidable as she had imagined. His hand caught hers just as the stranger lunged. Strong, controlled, unyielding, he pulled her, behind him in one swift motion. The would-be attacker stumbled back, reassessing, fear, flickering in his eyes for the first time. And then he understood. You're not supposed to... She started, but the words died on her lips. He pressed a finger to her lips, calm, commanding, the authority in his gesture absolute. Stay still, don't move. Not until I say, he whispered. And she obeyed. Her heart thumped wildly, not from fear alone, but from the proximity, the power he exuded. He was danger, and he was safety all at once, a contradiction she didn't understand but was already drawn to. The stranger tried again, stepping forward with menace, but he didn't need weapons. His eyes, his presence, the subtle shift in his stance, it was enough. One sharp command, one motion, and the threat was neutralized before it fully existed. She watched him, awe and terror mingling. Her mind struggled to comprehend what she had just witnessed. He was more than a man, more than the stranger she had hugged that night. He was a force, a protector she didn't understand and couldn't refuse. Are you hurt? He asked softly, his hands finally releasing her, though the tension in his posture remained. I'm fine, she stammered, shaking, unable to mask the mixture of fear and fascination coursing through her. Thank you. Her voice barely carried in the night, but he heard it. He nodded, eyes scanning the shadows one last time, calculating every angle, every risk. Then he turned to her, calm and unreadable. You can't go home the same way tonight, not yet. Follow me. She hesitated, but there was no question in his tone, no room for refusal. Something deep, inside, told her it wasn't just his authority. It was the certainty, the power, the danger that wrapped around him like a cloak. She followed, heart racing, mind spinning, yet drawn, inexplicably, irrevocably into his world. As they disappeared into the quiet night, she realized something chilling and exhilarating. Her life had already changed. The line between safety and peril, between fear and desire, was blurring. And the man who had rescued her, the stranger who had captivated her heart and mind, was no ordinary man. He was a Mafia boss, a shadow she could not escape, and, already, he had begun to steal her world, piece by piece. She didn't yet know the full danger she was stepping into. She didn't yet understand the rules of his world. But she felt it in her bones, the invisible thread tying her to him, the pull she couldn't resist, the promise that her life, her heart, and her fate had collided with his. And there was no turning back. The city felt different now. Shadows seemed longer, streets quieter, as if the world itself had shifted in the hours since he had pulled her from danger. She couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he moved, the way he had protected her, the weight of his presence that lingered in her thoughts like a pulse she couldn't ignore. Then came the message, simple, unmistakable, no words, just an address and a time. Her pulse quickened as she stared at it, every instinct screaming at her to ignore it. She didn't know who he really was, didn't know why he wanted her there. And yet, she wanted to go, wanted to see him again, to understand the gravity of the pull she couldn't resist. The address led her to a building she didn't recognize, grand and imposing. the kind of place that whispered wealth, power, and danger in every shadow. She hesitated at the entrance, fingers trembling as she brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. What had she gotten herself into? And yet, the thought of him waiting, calm, powerful, irresistible, pushed her forward. Inside, the air was warm, tinged with faint smoke and the scent of expensive cologne. He was there, waiting in the dim light, as if he had been expecting her every second of her journey. Dark eyes met hers, unwavering, commanding, and in that gaze, she felt both seen and measured, like a piece of fragile porcelain held in careful hands. "You came," he said, his voice low, smooth, controlled. Not a question, a statement, one that left no room for argument, but somehow felt like an invitation instead of an order. I had to," she whispered, unsure what compelled her. Her heart beat erratically, a mix of fear and anticipation. I don't know why I'm here." His gaze softened, imperceptibly, just enough to betray a flicker of emotion hidden beneath the armor of power. "You're here because you wanted to be, because curiosity and something else pulled you." He stepped closer, his movements precise, measured, each step deliberate. "Because you don't belong in your world entirely anymore, and neither do I." The words sent a shiver down her spine. She tried to speak, to protest, to ask what he meant, but no words came. She simply stood there, heart racing, sensing the dangerous allure that surrounded him, feeling herself drawn into a world she didn't yet understand but couldn't resist. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, the faint brush of his coat against hers. "Tonight, you'll see a part of my world," he said, his voice a whisper that promised both danger and wonder. "Not everything, just enough to understand why I've kept my distance, and why I can't." Her chest tightened. The tension, the danger, the attraction, it was all consuming. "I don't know if I should," she began, but he cut her off softly. "You don't get a choice, not really. Only decisions. Some are safe, some are unavoidable." His eyes darkened, piercing, and she felt exposed in a way she had never known. Exposed, but strangely alive, and then he extended his hand. A simple gesture, but it carried the weight of power, protection, and promise. She hesitated, just a heartbeat, and then placed her hand in his. The moment their fingers touched, an electric current shot through her, and she understood something she couldn't explain. She had crossed a threshold. With one glance at her, he stepped toward the door, leading her into the unknown, into his world, a world of wealth, influence, danger, and desire. A world she had never imagined, but one she already felt irrevocably drawn to. As they disappeared into the night together, she realized the truth she had been trying to deny. She wasn't just following a man, she was stepping into a life that would change her forever. A life with a stranger whose power, danger, and obsession would consume her in ways she could never escape, and somewhere deep inside, she didn't want to escape. She followed him through the doors of a world she had only glimpsed in whispers and fleeting shadows. The lobby alone was breathtaking. Marble floors that gleamed under chandeliers, walls lined with rare art, and the faint hum of unseen servants moving with silent precision. Every detail spoke of wealth, influence, and control. And at the center of it all stood him, calm, composed, impossibly in command. She felt small, fragile, like a bird in a predator's lair. And yet, as he turned to glance at her, the intensity in his gaze was not threatening. It was measuring, assessing, almost protective. She realized then that she was seeing the world through his eyes, through a lens that made every move, every glance, every whisper carry weight, power, and consequence. He led her through private corridors, rooms she couldn't name, past men and women who moved with precision and obedience. She felt eyes on her, whispered conversations that ceased as they passed, a silent acknowledgement that she was important because of him. It was intoxicating, terrifying, and utterly consuming. "This is," she began, but words failed her. Nothing she had ever known could compare to this mixture of danger, elegance, and control. He smiled, a small, almost imperceptible curve of his lips, and the look in his eyes made her pulse jump. "This is my world," he said, voice low, confident, like a command disguised as explanation. "Every corner, every person, every decision, it bends to me. But tonight it's yours, to see, to feel, to understand." She followed him into a room where the city sprawled beneath them through floor to ceiling. Windows. Lights flickered like stars, distant and indifferent. Yet from up here, with him standing, close, she felt the gravity of it all, the power he commanded, the danger he carried, the invisible threads of control that wove through every moment of his life. He poured 2 glasses of wine, the clink of crystal sharp in the quiet. Handing her one, he studied her with the same intensity that had haunted her dreams. "Most people wouldn't survive a night here," he said softly, almost a warning. "They wouldn't understand the rules, the hierarchy, the consequences." She sipped, tasting more than wine. Power, dominance, subtle danger. Her pulse raced, her nerves alight. She wanted to retreat, to flee. But part of her, some deep, inexplicable part, was drawn irresistibly closer. "Why, show me this," she whispered. He leaned slightly closer, the faint scent of him wrapping around her senses. "Because you're different," he said, voice low and intimate. "You notice, you feel, and I want you to understand before this world pulls you in completely, before it takes you in ways you can't resist." Her stomach tightened. Every word, every gesture, every glance made her feel alive in ways she couldn't explain. He was danger and protection, temptation and control, all at once. And she knew, with a certainty that frightened her, that once she stepped fully into this world, nothing would be the same again. He took her hand, guiding her to a balcony where the night air was cool, sharp, and alive. The city stretched endlessly below, and for a moment she imagined the countless lives unfolding, all unaware of the storm swirling just above them. "You have a choice," he said softly, almost tenderly, his eyes locking with hers. "You can leave now, go back to your life. Or you can stay, step fully into this world. Know the power, the danger, and the desire that comes with it." Her heart raced. She knew the risk, the peril, but the pull, the magnetic, dangerous pull, was too strong, and in that moment she made a choice she hadn't even realized she wanted. She didn't look away. She didn't hesitate. She stepped closer, drawn to the man, the power, the danger, and the intoxicating, forbidden allure of a world she was only beginning to understand. And as he watched her, dark eyes unreadable yet filled with intensity, she felt the invisible thread tighten. She was no longer just an observer. She was part of his world now, part of his power, part of a story she couldn't escape, and didn't want to. The night had settled over the city like a velvet curtain, soft and endless. She stood beside him, on the balcony, the cool breeze brushing her hair, her pulse still racing from the evening, from the danger, from the sheer weight of his world. The city lights shimmered below them, distant and indifferent. But up here, suspended between sky and shadows, everything felt closer, more intense, more alive. He didn't speak at first, letting the silence stretch, a quiet so heavy it seemed to carry the heartbeat of the night itself. And then, slowly, he turned to her, eyes dark, intense, and unguarded in a way she had never seen before. "I don't usually do this," he began, his voice low, measured, yet touched with an honesty that made her stomach twist. I don't let people in. Not fully. Not like this. Her breath caught. She had glimpsed his world, his power, his dominance. She had felt his control, his danger, the magnetic pull that left her breathless. But she hadn't expected this. Vulnerability, this admission that beneath the armor, beneath the shadow of the Mafia boss, he was human. I've built my life around control, he continued, eyes fixed on hers. Around rules, fear, and respect. People follow me because they must, because they want to, because they have no choice, and yet, you... He hesitated, a rare flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. You make me want things I've spent my life avoiding, things I've refused before, because I never allowed anyone in, because it's dangerous, and yet you make it impossible to stay away. She felt her heart thump wildly, caught between fear and desire. The words, the confession, the raw honesty, sent a shock through her, deeper than any danger he had ever shielded her from. For a moment she forgot the city, forgot the streets, forgot the danger lurking just beyond the balcony. All that mattered was him, and the weight of his truth. I don't understand, she whispered, her voice trembling, barely audible over the night breeze. Why me? Why now? He took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of his presence, the tension of control mingling with vulnerability. Because you're real, he admitted. Not fake, not cautious, not pretending. You see things, people, the world, differently. And I can't ignore it. I can't ignore you. Every time I look at you, every time I see your face, I'm reminded that life isn't just about power, control, and fear. That there's something more, something worth risking everything for. Her chest tightened. She wanted to retreat, to remind herself that he was dangerous, that he lived in a world she couldn't fully enter. But she couldn't move. She couldn't look away. His confession had stripped the world bare, had exposed the heart behind the legend, the man behind the Mafia boss. And you, he continued, his voice soft now, almost a whisper. You have no idea the effect you have. How impossible it is to keep distance. How impossible it is to stop thinking about you. About us before it even exists. Her pulse raced. Her breath hitched. She wanted to speak, to protest, to question, but words failed her. Instead, she reached out, lightly brushing her fingers against his hand, a silent acknowledgement that she felt the same pull, the same storm of emotion that he had revealed. He followed her gesture, holding her hand, letting it linger. The city lights below shimmered, but all she saw were his eyes, dark, intense, and now soft in ways she never expected. For the first time, she understood the man beneath the power, the darkness, the danger. And she realized something terrifying and exhilarating at once. She was falling for him. And he knew it, and somewhere deep inside, she wanted him to know that she was ready to step further, to follow, to risk whatever this was, whatever it could become. Because in that moment, under the night sky, with the city stretched beneath them and the invisible threads of fate tightening, she understood the truth of his confession. That desire, danger, and a love that could consume them both had already begun. The night had deepened into something electric, a quiet tension hovering over the city like a living thing. She stood close to him on the balcony, the wind tugging gently at her hair, but she barely noticed it. The only thing that mattered was him, his presence, his scent, the way the shadows seemed to cling to him as if the darkness itself obeyed his will. He was closer now than ever before, so close that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, the subtle vibration of his heartbeat beneath the calm surface he always maintained. She wanted to step back, to remind herself that he was dangerous, a man from a world she could never truly belong to. But she couldn't. Her feet were rooted, her body betraying her mind, drawn by something primal, magnetic, irresistible. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice low, deliberate, carrying that same dangerous edge that had haunted her dreams. She blinked, unsure how to answer. "Feel what?" "The pull," he said softly, his eyes dark, unreadable, yet somehow open, vulnerable. "Between us, the danger, the tension, the truth we can't deny." Her heart raced. The tension, the danger, the forbidden allure. It was all consuming. She had felt it since the first moment he had wrapped her in his arms that night on the street. She had resisted it, fought it, tried to convince herself that he was untouchable, impossible, and yet she had never known a desire so fierce, so undeniable. He moved slightly closer, the faintest brush of his coat against hers sending shivers down her spine. The air between them was charged, taut with unspoken words, with the weight of emotions neither dared fully voice. She could feel his breath, steady but warm, and it brushed against her cheek, making her pulse spike, her thoughts blur. "You're dangerous," she whispered, her voice trembling. You're dangerous to me." He tilted his head, almost a smirk teasing the corners of his lips. "And you," he murmured, "you're dangerous to me." That single admission made something inside her crack, a barrier she had built around her. Caution, her fear, her restraint. He leaned closer, closer than anyone had ever dared. His dark eyes locked onto hers, filled with intensity, with desire, with something unspoken yet unavoidable. She could feel his hand lift, brushing her jaw, tilting her face slightly, as if the very motion carried the weight of inevitability. Her breath caught, her body trembling. She wanted to protest, to pull back, but she couldn't. She didn't want to. And then he kissed her. It wasn't soft, tentative, or fleeting. It was deliberate, commanding, consuming. His lips pressed against hers with a heat that ignited every nerve, every heartbeat, every thought she had ever had about desire and danger. She melted into him, and yet she remained aware of the world below, aware of the risk, aware of the fact that this man, this Mafia boss, was as untouchable as he was irresistible. Her hands rose instinctively, touching his chest, feeling the solid strength beneath, feeling the tension that mirrored her own. Every heartbeat, every breath, every inch of closeness pulled them together, deeper into a connection that was both terrifying and exhilarating. When he finally pulled back, just enough to look into her eyes, the intensity of the moment lingered, unbroken, unrelenting. He whispered, almost reverently, "You have no idea what you do to me." She swallowed, breathless, lost, and yet more alive than she had ever been. The danger was real. The attraction was undeniable. And she knew, with a certainty that thrilled and terrified her at once, that this kiss was only the beginning of something dark, something forbidden, something that could consume them both, and yet something she couldn't and wouldn't resist. The city felt alive with shadows that night, shadows that whispered threats and secrets she couldn't yet understand. She had thought the danger was behind her, that the night of the first rescue, the first touch, the first kiss, had marked a turning point. But danger doesn't wait. Danger doesn't forgive, and it certainly doesn't care about love, desire, or fragile hearts. She was leaving a small boutique when she first sensed it. A subtle shift in the air, a presence behind her that didn't belong. Her pulse quickened, her instincts screaming, and before she could react, hands grabbed her, dragging her into the alley. Panic rose in her chest, but then, like a phantom materializing from darkness, he was there. The Mafia boss, the man she had hugged, kissed, and let steal her heart, moved with precision and power. His eyes, dark and unyielding, scanned the alley, calculating, analyzing, predicting every threat before it could strike. He stepped between her and the men who had dared to corner her, and in an instant, she felt the same mix of fear, awe, and forbidden attraction that had pulled her to him from the start. "You're safe," he murmured, voice low, controlled, yet carrying an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. "But not for long if we stay here." Her heart raced as he moved closer, his presence a shield she couldn't see but could feel. She wanted to ask questions, to understand why this was happening, but his gaze silenced her. Not harshly, just with the quiet authority of a man who ruled his world with unspoken rules. The attackers lunged, underestimated the force and precision of a man used to commanding fear. One move, swift and deliberate, and they were disarmed, retreating into the shadows they had come from. He didn't need weapons. His control, his power, his very presence was enough to make them think twice. She stared at him, awe and fear mingling in her chest. Why does this keep happening?" she whispered almost to herself. "Because danger follows me," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "The touchlight, but electric. And now, so does it follow you. You've stepped into my world whether you like it or not. And I won't let anything or anyone hurt you." Her chest tightened at the intensity in his eyes, the raw emotion hidden beneath his calm, controlled exterior. She realized that this wasn't just protection. It was obsession, a desire to shield her from everything, even the danger he couldn't always control. He held her close for a moment, grounding her in the storm of adrenaline and fear, and she realized something terrifying. She trusted him. Fully. Completely. And that trust made her heart ache with something deeper than attraction. Something that could break her if it was betrayed. "We have to move," he said finally, voice softer, almost tender. "Tonight isn't safe. Not here. Not for you." She nodded, too breathless to speak, feeling the invisible thread tighten around them both. She followed him without hesitation, stepping into a world of secrecy, power, and peril. She couldn't fully grasp, but couldn't escape. Every step she took beside him reinforced the truth she had been trying to deny. Her life, her heart, her very soul were now entangled with a man whose power and danger were inseparable from the love and desire she felt for him. As they disappeared into the shadows of the city, she realized something chilling and exhilarating at once. Danger wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside. The thrill, the passion, the forbidden allure of a man who could destroy and protect her in the same heartbeat. And deep down, she knew she wouldn't have it any other way. The city was quieter tonight, or maybe it just felt quieter because they were together. Side by side in the private confines of his world, away from the chaos and danger, she finally allowed herself to breathe. But even in this rare calm, the weight of their reality lingered, pressing against her chest with every heartbeat. He turned to her, the dim light catching the sharp angles of his face, the shadows softening the edges of the man she had learned to fear, to desire, to trust. There was something different in his eyes tonight, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before, one that made her pulse quicken and her stomach twist with both anticipation and fear. "I need to tell you something," he began, voice low, measured, but carrying a rawness she hadn't heard before. "Something I shouldn't, something that could change everything." She looked up at him, breathless, caught between curiosity and apprehension. "What is it?" she whispered, barely audible. He hesitated, a flicker of emotion crossing his otherwise unreadable features. Then he exhaled, just enough to steady himself. "I'm not just a man who protects, who commands, who walks in shadows," he admitted. "I'm someone who feels deeply, and I feel for you more than I should, more than I ever allowed myself to feel for anyone." Her heart skipped, trapped somewhere between fear and longing. She had known he was dangerous, powerful, untouchable. And yet, hearing him confess, hearing him admit that he felt something as raw and intense as the attraction she couldn't hide, made the world spin. I feel it too, she whispered, voice trembling, eyes searching his. From the first moment I felt drawn to you, and I tried to fight it. I really did. But I can't. I don't want to. His lips parted slightly, as if surprised, almost disarmed by her honesty. You don't know what this means, he said softly. Being with me, stepping into my world. It's dangerous. It could destroy you. I know, she said firmly, despite the tremble in her voice. But I don't care. Not about the danger. Not about your world. I trust you and I want you. He stepped closer, the intensity in his eyes pulling her in, closer, into a space where reason and caution melted away. Do you understand what you're saying? He asked, voice low, almost a growl beneath the calm. That being with me could consume everything you know, everything you are. I understand, she whispered, barely audible, but her eyes never wavered. And I'm willing to risk it. Something shifted in him then, a crack in the armor, a glimpse of the man beneath the Mafia boss. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and the touch lingered, soft yet commanding. You don't know how long I've wanted to hear that, he admitted. How long I've wanted someone who could see through the danger, see through the walls, and still want me. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from fear, but from the overwhelming weight of honesty, desire, and connection. I do want you, she said, almost desperately. All of you. Even the danger. Even the chaos. Even the world I can't understand yet. He closed the distance then, gently pressing his forehead against hers, letting the moment stretch, letting the city fade away until it was just the two of them, hearts beating in sync, desires entwined, fears shared, and a promise hanging between them, unspoken yet undeniable. Then we're in this, he murmured, together, no matter what comes. She nodded, feeling the invisible thread tighten, binding them not just in desire but in something deeper, something neither could escape, something destined. And in that quiet, electrifying moment, amidst the shadows of his world and the lingering danger that awaited, they confessed not just to each other, but to themselves. Their hearts had been claimed, irrevocably, completely, and there was no turning back. The night had never felt lonelier. She walked the empty streets, clutching her coat around her, every heartbeat echoing the emptiness she felt inside. She had seen his world, tasted the danger and the passion, and for a fleeting moment, she believed in them, in their connection, their bond. But now everything felt broken. It had started with a message she wasn't meant to see, words that twisted reality into something unrecognizable, names, threats, insinuations, a betrayal that seemed impossible. The man she had trusted, the man whose touch had ignited her soul, was accused of things she couldn't believe, things that threatened to destroy the fragile trust between them. Her mind spun with confusion. Her heart screamed at her to run back to him, to demand answers, to hold on to the truth she knew in her bones. But the world around her felt sharper, colder, like every shadow carried whispers of deceit, like every corner hid eyes waiting to see her falter. Meanwhile, he moved in the shadows of his own world, unaware of her torment, yet fully aware of the dangers pressing in from all sides. Enemies he had kept at bay were closer than ever, manipulating the truth, weaving lies that threatened to reach her. And he knew, even as he fought to protect her, that the deception might reach her before he could explain, before he could reveal the real danger lurking in the dark. She thought of the warmth of his hands, the softness of his lips, the safety she had felt in his arms, and yet those memories now twisted into doubt, pain, and longing. How could the man who had been everything to her suddenly become someone she couldn't trust? Someone whose shadowed world seemed ready to consume them both. Her thoughts were interrupted by a figure stepping out of the darkness. Not him. A messenger, a warning, a threat, and a lie all rolled into one. Words were whispered, carefully chosen, venomous, and meant to hurt. Words that would make her question everything she had felt, everything she had believed. She ran, not toward him, not away from danger, but into the storm of emotion she couldn't process. Betrayal, confusion, longing. Her legs carried her without thought, tears blurring the streetlights, heart racing faster than the fear in her chest. She had never felt so lost. And he waited. In a room he could barely trust, in a world where enemies lurked at every turn. He felt the absence of her presence like a dagger to the chest. He hadn't betrayed her, never. But the lies, the misunderstandings, the carefully orchestrated threats had done what he couldn't. They had driven her away. He clenched his fists, jaw tight, mind racing with plans to fix it, to bring her back, to tear the lies apart and show her the truth. But even as he moved, strategized, and prepared, he knew the clock was ticking. Every second apart made the bond fragile, made the distance between them wider, made the fear that she might never return stronger. And in her apartment, alone, she stared at the message again, rereading the words, the lies, the accusations. Every rational thought told her to confront him, to demand the truth. But pride, fear, and heartbreak anchored her in place. She didn't know if she could face him. Not yet. Outside, the city hummed indifferently. The night held its breath. And somewhere between the shadows, the lies, and the truth, two hearts that had once intertwined were now forced apart by misunderstanding, by enemies, by a world neither could control. And as the screen of her phone glowed faintly in the darkness, the message unread, the lie unchallenged, the cliffhanger hung in the air. Would love survive the betrayal, or would danger and deceit finally claim them both? The night was thick with danger. She had no idea he was coming, not yet. All she knew was fear, the kind that crawled under her skin, making every sound, every shadow, every distant footstep feel like a threat. The lies, the betrayal, the cruel twist of fate had trapped her in a web she couldn't escape on her own. And then he appeared, not as a shadow this time, not as a distant presence lurking in the edges of her world. He was there, dark, commanding, untouchable. Every movement precise, every step deliberate, every glance warning enemies that the man who claimed her heart would not be denied. The men who had cornered her didn't stand a chance. She felt the change in the air before she saw him, an electric pulse, a shift that made the danger tangible, imminent, and completely undone by his arrival. He moved like a force of nature, swift, ruthless, calculating. Each strike, each command, each subtle gesture sent a message clear as day. This was his territory, his rules, and anyone who dared cross him would pay. Her heart raced, a mix of fear and relief, adrenaline and longing. He reached her just as the last of the attackers faltered, disarmed not by brute force alone, but by his presence, his authority, the invisible gravity of power he carried like a second skin. "You're safe," he said, voice low, controlled, but edged with raw emotion she had never heard before. "I told you. I won't let anyone touch you." She wanted to speak, to tell him she had been scared, that she had doubted, that she had missed him in ways that hurt her soul, but words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply clung to him, letting the warmth, the safety, the undeniable presence of the man who had stolen her heart anchor her in a world gone wild with danger. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, and in that glance she saw everything: the worry, the intensity, the obsession, the desire. She saw the man beneath the Mafia boss, the one who loved her, feared for her, and would risk everything to protect her. "I told you," he murmured, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering, longer than necessary. "I warned you. This world is dangerous, and yet, here you are, still, standing, still of mine." She felt tears prick at her eyes, not from fear, but from the overwhelming rush of emotion. The betrayal, the confusion, the longing. All of it melted away in that moment, replaced by a sense of belonging she had never known. In his arms, she wasn't a pawn, a target, or a stranger in his world. She was hers and his, and that was enough. But the danger wasn't gone. He scanned the streets, calculating, planning, already anticipating what threats might return. Every second of this city night reminded her of the peril that surrounded them, of the stakes that defined their lives. Yet even as he moved with lethal precision, protecting her, shielding her from harm, she felt it, the bond, the connection, the unspoken promise that he would always come for her, no matter the cost. "Stay close," he whispered, guiding her through the shadows, through the city streets alive with hidden eyes and silent threats. "I won't leave your side again. Not tonight. Not ever." She clung to his arm, her pulse matching his, her heart racing with adrenaline, fear, and something far more dangerous: desire. The rescue was more than physical. It was emotional, a declaration, a reminder that no power, no deception, no threat could sever what they shared. And as they disappeared into the night together, two hearts intertwined, two souls bound by trust, love, and danger, she realized something chilling and exhilarating. He was not just her protector. He was her fate, and nothing, not enemies, not lies, not the world itself, would ever change that. The city lights flickered below them, distant and indifferent, but up here, in the quiet of the penthouse, the world felt suspended. Everything else, the danger, the enemies, the shadows of his world, was muted, insignificant compared to the storm of emotion that filled the room. She stood before him, heart pounding, eyes searching his. No lies, no shadows, no games. Just the truth that had been building between them like a pressure that could no longer be contained. "I can't hide it anymore," she whispered, voice trembling yet resolute. I love you." The words hung in the air, fragile yet immense. Her hands shook slightly, and she expected him to say nothing, to retreat, to remind her of the danger that surrounded them both. But he didn't. His eyes softened, dark and unreadable as ever. But now there was something else: vulnerability, intensity, and a depth of feeling he had rarely allowed anyone to see. You love me?" His voice was low, almost a growl, carrying disbelief, awe, and something deeper that made her knees weak. "Yes," she breathed. "Every moment. From the first touch, the first hug, the first time I felt your presence. I've tried to fight it. I've tried to deny it. But I can't. I don't want to. I love you." For a heartbeat, the world paused. The city below, the shadows outside, the whispers of danger. All of it faded into the background. It was just the two of them, hearts open, souls raw, standing on the edge of something forbidden yet undeniable. He took a slow step closer, hands brushing against hers, lifting her face gently to meet his gaze. I've never allowed anyone in like this," he admitted, voice husky with emotion. "I've lived in shadows, controlled lives, ruled with fear, and kept everyone at a distance. But you've changed everything. You've made me feel things I've spent my life suppressing. And now I can't imagine a world without you in it." Her chest tightened, tears threatening, but not from sadness. From the overwhelming weight of truth and love finally spoken aloud. "I don't care about your world," she said softly, but with conviction. "I know it's dangerous. I know it's complicated. But I want you. All of you. No matter the risk." He swallowed hard. The rare vulnerability of a man used to commanding everything laid bare in that moment. Then, Slowly, deliberately, he closed the distance between them, his forehead resting against hers. "You're everything I never knew I needed," he murmured. "And I love you too, more than I've ever loved anyone, more than I should. And I don't care about the rules. The danger, the world outside this room, I want you, only you, forever." Her breath caught, a mixture of relief, desire, and sheer joy flooding her senses. The weight of unspoken words, the tension of danger, and the pull of attraction all converged in that single, soul-deep moment. She let herself lean into him, letting her fingers trace the line of his jaw, the strength of his shoulders, the warmth of the man who had become her world. "I'm yours," she whispered. "No matter what, always." "And I'm yours," he said, voice raw with emotion and authority, as if sealing a promise that neither danger nor deceit could ever break. And then finally their lips met, not as a fleeting kiss, but as a declaration of everything, unspoken, everything feared, everything felt. It was a kiss that held danger, desire, protection, and surrender all at once. A kiss that bound their hearts, defied the shadows of his world, and declared to the universe that love, even in a world of Mafia power and peril, could not, and would not, be denied. For the first time, they weren't afraid. They weren't holding back. They were theirs, completely, irrevocably, and with that, the night felt infinite, and the city below could wait. The morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and warm, yet it couldn't erase the shadows that lingered. Shadows of danger, shadows of his world, shadows of the past they had both survived. But today, for the first time in what felt like forever, the shadows didn't feel threatening. They were reminders, not chains, proof of battles fought, storms weathered, and a love that had endured it all. She sat across from him at the small breakfast table, a faint smile playing on her lips. The city, beyond the windows, hummed with life, indifferent to their victories and trials. But inside this room, inside this fragile bubble, it felt like theirs alone. Every glance they shared carried a promise, every touch a reaffirmation that despite the danger, despite the darkness, they had found each other and chosen each other. He poured coffee into their mugs, movements precise but careful, his eyes never leaving hers. "It's quiet today," he said, voice low, almost surprised by the calm. "Too quiet, maybe." She laughed softly, the sound light and genuine, a contrast to the storm that had once surrounded them. "Maybe it's a good thing," she replied. "A moment to breathe, a moment to just exist without the chaos." He studied her, dark eyes softening, a rare vulnerability peeking through the controlled exterior he wore like armor. "I've never had a moment like this," he admitted. "Never allowed myself to just live. But with you, it feels possible, even in this world." Her heart swelled, a mixture of warmth and longing. She reached across the table, placing her hand in his. The connection was electric yet grounding, a reminder of everything they had survived and everything they had fought to keep. "We've faced danger," she said softly. "We've survived lies, enemies, betrayals. And still, we're here, together." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Together," he echoed. "And I promise, whatever comes, whatever the world throws at us, I'll protect you. Not just from others, but from the parts of this life that could harm us both. I'll fight. I'll risk everything. Because you're worth it." She felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming mixture of relief, love, and hope. "And I'll fight with you," she whispered. "No matter what. Because this, us, it's worth it too." The silence that followed was comfortable, filled with a shared understanding, a bond, strengthened by adversity, danger, and desire. Outside, The city continued its relentless rhythm, a reminder that life never stops, that threats always linger. But inside, there was a new reality, one where they could breathe, hope, and love without constantly looking over their shoulders. He stood then, walking to the window, scanning the city with the quiet vigilance that had always defined him. But this time, he relaxed slightly, a subtle shift in posture, a rare peace settling over his shoulders. He turned to her, eyes locking with hers, a silent acknowledgement of the life they were building, of the love that had conquered fear and darkness. "Are you ready?" he asked, voice low, almost playful, yet carrying the weight of promise. She nodded, standing to join him at the window. "Ready," she said, feeling the invisible thread that had bound them through every trial tighten once more, stronger than ever. And as they stood there together, looking out over the city that had tested, threatened, and shaped them, she realized something profound. Danger would never fully disappear. But this love was stronger, unbreakable, irrevocable. The night of shadows and the day of light had collided to create something enduring, something fierce, something theirs. And while the future remained uncertain, one thing was crystal clear. They would face it together, hand in hand, hearts intertwined, and no threat, no secret, no darkness could ever tear them apart. The world outside continued, full of mystery and peril, but inside, they had found their sanctuary, their beginning and their forever. And that is how their story began. A love forged in danger, tested by betrayal, and sealed by hearts that refused to let go. If you felt the tension, the passion, and the thrill of their world, don't miss what happens next. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay with us as we dive deeper into the lives of those who love fiercely, dangerously, and completely. Join us and be part of a world where every kiss, every secret, and every heartbeat keeps you on the edge of your seat,